A Moonlit Dilemma by Rhonda Parker. Narrated by Bradford Hale. Featuring Good Boy Audios and Rhonda Parker. The sound of the poachers crashing through the forest echoed behind Mason. He managed to stay ahead of them, but he had a feeling his luck was running out. Mason had been enjoying a quiet night in the woods, a rare treat for a werewolf in the modern age of technology with fewer wild spaces. His family had lived in the area for generations, and his roots ran deep. His grandfather left him a sizable expanse of wilderness outside of town, covered in a lush forest and teeming with wildlife. The young man had carved out a small habitat deep within it, a space where he could safely run free and enjoy connecting with nature every full moon. The sanctity of being on private land gave him a sense of security, and Mason was grateful that he hadn't cleared any land for a homestead. The forest became his refuge. Mason was careful. He didn't hunt humans, hadn't even thought about it since he started living with his wolf nature a few years ago. The forest had plenty of game to keep him occupied and fed. While he owned a car, he never brought it to the woods. No need to bring anything that could lead anyone back to him. This suited him just fine. Mason had been an avid hiker before, and now that his physical characteristics and abilities were enhanced, he could pack his gear and walk from home. The challenge and the exercise were good for him in a lot of ways. Then the poachers showed up, a blight on the forest, and Mason's monthly excursions. They were unpredictable, less prone to staying in a general area, and better at stealth than a regular hunter. They didn't want to be caught, so Mason felt like he needed to keep his guard up constantly, often exhausting both halves of himself. Except for tonight. The autumn wind ran invisible fingers through his chestnut-brown fur, gentle and loving. Mason relished the feel of it, took comfort in Mother Nature's touch. He'd kept enough composure to avoid howling, but he did sigh in contentment. If nothing else, being a werewolf fed his lifelong love for the outdoors in ways his humanity couldn't. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to stop the canine roar of a sneeze that escaped his snout. The sound felt like it echoed into the night.
What was that?
A voice cut into the darkness. Mason froze, listening and sniffing. Poachers. Once he had determined where they were, he bolted to get some distance between himself and his pursuers. As he cleared the forest proper, Mason could smell as well as hear a large group of humans.
Great,
he thought.
More poachers?
Then he caught the scent of a multitude of foods, heard the sounds of laughter and playful screams. The town's Halloween festival! He forgot all about it. Now he was caught between a rock and a hard place. Deal with the ignorant humans at the festival, or the ones in the woods that thought he was a good trophy. The odds weren't in his favor against the poachers. He didn't have a choice. Mason steeled himself as best as he could and entered at the edge of the festival grounds. The smells and sounds were intriguing outside of the fairgrounds, but once inside, his senses went into overload. His human brain tried to tell his wolf brain that everything was okay, but animal instinct fought with common sense and reason. He shook his head, trying to clear it. Once he regained some control, Mason looked around. Most of the people at the festival were in costumes of varying intensity, from basic get-ups to full-blown ensembles. No one would notice a stray dog in all of this commotion, right? He shook himself off and started wandering the festival. Mason usually avoided humans during the week of the full moon. While he knew he could maintain control, it wasn't wise to risk harming someone. Now he had an up-close view of the people from his town. It was entertaining, to say the least. People laughing, joking with each other, comparing costumes, and enjoying themselves in general. A few people tried to coax him over with, "Come here, boy," or even a treat, but he played skittish and kept moving. As he neared the opposite end of the fairgrounds, Mason raised his head and sniffed the air. The kaleidoscope of scents inside the area hadn't changed much. The poachers might be nearby, but the crowd at the festival should have obscured any tracks he made and thrown them off his trail. At least he hoped it had. He should be able to sneak out of the festival and...
Puppy!
What the?
Mason yelped as something collided with him, making him stumble back a step or two. He felt something wrap around his neck, and he twisted and pulled away from whatever it was. Once he got his bearings again, he looked at what hit him. An adorable, strawberry blonde girl stood there, draped in a purple satiny dress with puffs of pink tulle, her sparkly plastic crown askew. A smile lit up her face as she reached out and patted his head with the awkward roughness of a child.
Puppy,
She said, a thick coating of sweetness and adoration on her voice. Her green eyes sparkled as she looked at him. Mason thought for a second of growling at her, then decided he didn't want to scare her. But how was this kid not scared of him?
Oh boy,
He thought.
this is what it's come to.
Mason sat down, wagged his tail, and panted. He felt like an idiot. The little girl, however, was thrilled.
good puppy.
She cooed as she stroked his fur. She couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old, that age where all animals are trustworthy playmates. Mason wasn't about to destroy that illusion for her. He endured the attention for as long as he could, then started to walk away. But the little girl followed.
Come back, puppy.
Mason tried running a little faster, which only made the little girl more determined to catch him.
Wait, come back.
Where are her parents?
Mason thought. He didn't see any adults or teenagers that looked like her family members. Given that the little girl seemed precocious, he had a feeling that she might have slipped away unnoticed.
Well, I can't leave her by herself. And being a pet is a good cover. Might as well make the best of this.
The two of them started walking around the fairgrounds. The little girl reached over to pet Mason every so often, and spoke to him a few times. But mostly, she exuded the wonder of a child her age. Mason laughed to himself as he kept a close eye on her. Something would catch her attention, and she went after it with gusto. His protective instinct was out in full force. Mason was also keeping an eye out for the poachers, making sure they hadn't entered the fairgrounds. The varied scents of the festival hadn't changed. So far, so good.
Well, hey there, little girl.
An oily voice cooed. Mason snapped his head around. A man dressed rather shabbily was walking towards him and the girl. His salt and pepper beard was scraggly, and his hair looked like it hadn't been washed recently. Something about the look in his eye set the werewolf's fur on end, and he knew this was not a man to be trusted. A low growl rumbled in his throat. The man gave Mason a look, as if he thought the large dog wasn't a threat.
Easy, boy. I'm just talking to your friend.
Mason put himself between the girl and the man. Her fingers gripped Mason's fur. and he sensed her fear. The man pulled a piece of beef jerky from his pocket and held it out to Mason.
Want a treat, boy? Huh?
Mason responded with a warning, a loud growl, slightly bared teeth. He wasn't going to let him get anywhere near the girl. He might not hunt humans as a general rule, but he wouldn't hesitate attacking one to protect her. The man met the werewolf's gaze and he stopped short. Mason felt the girl's grip get tighter and heard a slight whimper escape her throat. He snapped at the man, flashing his teeth, saliva dripping from his canines. He dared the interloper to move any closer. His muscles were tensed, ready to spring. The man realized that continuing to antagonize the dog was a very bad idea.
Okay.
He said as he started to back away. Once Mason couldn't smell him anymore, he relaxed, sitting down and wagging his tail. That seemed to be the little girl's cue to release her death grip on his fur.
He was scary.
Mason nodded, then remembered he was pretending to be a dog. He did his best goofy dog imitation, complete with his tongue hanging from the side of his mouth. The little girl hugged his neck, and once she let him go, he led her back to the main crowd, and hopefully to safety. Now the little girl kept close to Mason's side, never letting him out of her sight. Sometimes her tiny fingers would wrap themselves in his fur again, unsure of herself, and he tried to keep reassuring her the best that he could. The crowd was starting to thin out, the guests exiting at the main gates. Mason once again looked for any sign of the poachers, sniffing the air in larger gulps. Until he got out of the fairgrounds proper, he couldn't be sure they were gone, but nothing suggested they were nearby.
Have you seen my little girl? She's about this tall.
Mason turned his head toward the sound of the voice.
Green eyes.
A woman who looked like a larger version of his charge, minus the princess costume, was asking someone if they had seen her daughter. As they got closer, Mason barked to get the woman's attention. She turned in the direction of the sound, and relief washed over her face.
Oh, thank God! There you are!
She scooped the little girl up into her arms and held her tight. Mason smiled to himself.
Mission accomplished.
Hi, Mommy. I found a puppy.
She said brightly.
I can see that, Stephanie.
Her mother said as she gave Mason a wary expression. He turned the friendly dog look up to 11. Her face softened. She smiled at him as she set the girl down, and the family resemblance was clear.
He's a good puppy. Isn't he pretty?
Mason closed his eyes as she scratched behind his ears. Stephanie's mother roughed up the fur on his head.
Thank you for taking care of her.
She looked at her daughter.
Come on, sweetie. Time to go home.
Can we take the puppy?
Mason froze. How was he going to get out of this? Stephanie's mother knelt down.
No, Stephanie. He probably belongs to someone nearby. You wouldn't want to take someone's dog away from them, would you?
The little girl looked downcast.
No.
Okay, then. Say bye-bye to the puppy, sweetie.
Stephanie flung her little arms around Mason's shaggy neck, snuggling into his fur. He closed his eyes, wishing he could return the hug or at least say something to her. He thought about licking her cheek, but he wasn't truly a dog. Plus, that would be weird. He settled for resting his chin on her shoulder, and his sigh ruffled her hair. After a few moments, the little girl let him go.
Bye, puppy.
She said with more than a tinge of sadness in her voice.
I miss you.
She took her mother's hand and left Mason sitting there. The whine in his throat caught him off guard. Mason wasn't expecting to miss the little tyke. He would remember her name, though. Stephanie, the little girl who wasn't afraid of the big bad wolf.